I mean, I don't know how many people have talked about this. We are being catechized on our online world, or digitized, depending on what your social media diet is, what your news is. We're all being catechized in one way or another, which means that we're all being shaped to live and be formed in a certain world, a worldview as we go through this. How we catechize our kids is not just giving the information, but it's also giving them skills necessary to discern. Is I love how you said cultural discernment is discern how to engage. And this is makes it very difficult because I remember growing up, I remember, I'm at that vintage where you could get your own TV in your room. And I remember saying, I'm never going to have my kids allow them to have a TV in their room. Well, they don't. They have cell phones, which is worse.
Yeah.
And they're engaging a world all the time and engaging a world. And no matter how much I try, I can't keep everything out. So I have to teach them discerning skills to inoculate them. Or as one pastor told me, I try to inoculate my kids to the world a little bit at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And delve into these subjects and questions and stuff that I think our parents' generation never would talk about with us. We don't have that option.
No.
It's in front of them all the time. You want to talk about sexuality and transgenderism and homosexuality and lesbian relationships and gay, whatever you want to say, our kids, and I don't care if they're in a Christian school. Matter of fact, sometimes there it's worse, quite honestly. It just is because I think to my kids, my daughter would come home and some of her best friends were gay at school, and she want to have those conversations. And so I was constantly, and again, catechizing Deuteronomy 6.
Yep.
This is what you're talking about, except it's not just in the family atmosphere. It's the church and the church's responsibility to catechize them, right? That's what they were doing.
Yeah, and that's so. In the book, I use like James K.A. Smith's Cultural Liturgies, and I think that's a great book that just talks about how the culture is catechizing you. He uses the image of a shopping mall to argue when you walk in a shopping mall, that everything has been carefully crafted to get you to perform in certain ways. I mean, so there is a performance that is happening, and yeah, you extrapolate that onto our phones, onto social media. Everything is carefully crafted for you to perform, and we have got to come up with alternative performances. And I think this is one way evangelicalism has been weak on liturgy and on worship. We sort of go to worship on Sunday, but realizing the spiritual life is one that lives in these patterns, these like liturgical performances. I talk a bit about prayer and something like, for example, the Didache, one of the earliest Christian manuals we have, tells you to pray the Lord's Prayer 3 times a day. Now, the purpose of that was to create a life where you're thinking about the Lord's Prayer constantly. You're thinking about, this is pray without ceasing. This is a life that is lived, that is formed. So regardless of whatever ditches or dangers you meet, you're walking that narrow path as much as possible with a heart that's oriented toward God, and that's only met through formation. I agree with my kids. My wife and I are very vigilant about things that come into our house, but we recognize it is, they have access to so much, they hear so much, and unless we are forming them, briefly, I mean, we use the New City Catechism. You talked about the New City Catechism. We use the New City Catechism, we do family prayer, we do things that are trying to create a liturgical pattern within our family, but then trying within our church to emphasize a regular habit of going to worship. But I think this kind of thing is what you saw in the early church, and something that has got to translate to today, of a spiritual life that is embedded and oriented towards the good things of God. But it's tough because that has not been the emphasis always within evangelicalism in the 20th century.
That I find is the biggest challenge. It's not just the cultural part, it's the church mechanism itself and how it's been constructed in the last 50 years, because it has become a part where you get your goods and services and you leave. You're not embedded in that community.